Off and running. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Mighty Blaze. I'm Jenna Blum, one of the co-founders of The Blaze. And today for our Friday Frontliner interview, we are so excited to welcome Kristina McMorris. Welcome, Kristina. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to see you.
Oh my gosh, me, you too. We're just going to have like this girl gossip fest. So if that's what you've come for, you're in the right place. Before I introduce my dear friend, I'm going to introduce The Blaze. Hi, Diane. Thank you for joining us today. If you're new to The Blaze, welcome. We are a team of 35 creative professional volunteers who are dedicated to connecting writers and readers in the age of COVID and now in the age of endemic and far beyond, since digital is here to stay. This is the best program you can get and not even have to wear pants. And if you like what you see here, give us a like or a follow on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. We are ubiquitous on Book Talk. Come find us everywhere. And please consider signing up for our newsletter, which is at www.amightyblaze.com, so that you'll never have literary FOMO ever again. No more FOMO. Nobody likes that. So if you are a Blaze, part of Blaze Nation already, hi, Susie. Thank you again for joining us today and always keeping the party lit. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my fabulous guest, Kristina McMorris. You ready for your official bio that I modified like a little bit?
Oh, goodness. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
You look so smart.
I know. Very serious now.
Okay.
Kristina McMorris, this is my serious voice. Kristina McMorris is the New York Times bestselling author of 2 novellas and 6 novels, including the runaway bestseller Sold on a Monday. Initially inspired by her grandparents' World War II courtship letters, her works of fiction have garnered more than 20 national literary awards. Prior to her writing career, I'm laughing at this because I know this already, she owned a wedding and event planning company until she had far surpassed her limit of YMCA and chicken dances, which we will, of course, ask you to do on camera. Kristina also worked as a weekly TV show host for Warner Brothers and an ABC affiliate beginning at age 9 with an Emmy Award-winning program. And she lives near Portland, Oregon, and does not own a single umbrella.
This is true.
Hooray. Yes, we are so happy to have you. And today, Kristina is here to talk about her new book, The Ways We Hide, which just dropped in September. So excited to talk about this. Welcome.
Thank you. So fun to be here.
We're so happy. I'm just happy to see you. Okay, so I'm going to spill the tea a little bit.
Okay.
Before we start talking about The Ways We Hide and all of Kristina's illustrious accomplishments. She and I know each other, and some of the people in the chat know this because we both contributed to this anthology called Grand Central, subtitled Original Stories of Post-War Love and Reunion. And the reason I'm laughing is that my story was the only one in this anthology that was super dark and featured a man trying to commit suicide at Grand Central. Everybody else is like, I am the person who didn't follow the instructions, and everybody else was writing these like beautiful stories. Anyway, in Grand Central, like, all of the stories take place in Grand Central Station on the same day in 1945 when America's coming home from the war. And Kristina masterminded this whole anthology, got together our Grand Central sisters, like all best-selling World War II historical novelists, Pam Jenoff, Karen White, Erica Roebuck, Sarah McCoy, Allison Richmond, Kristen Hanna. Who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting somebody.
Oh my gosh. I was like, yep. And I didn't keep track in my head. I'm so sorry. There's like 10 of us. And then Kristen Hanna wrote the foreword.
I could read this. Melanie Benjamin. And Sarah Gio. Oh my God. So sorry, you guys. And Amanda Hodgkinson.
Yeah.
And at first, when this assignment came into my email, I was like, I don't know if I have time to do that. I don't know if I have time to write a novella. I'm so precious. My time's so precious. And then we quickly found out that because she was a wedding planner, Kristina is not only relentlessly organized, but incredibly charming. And so in short order, we found ourselves in period costume doing author cosplay with our hair and everything, launching Grand Central at Grand Central Station because of this woman sitting right here.
Oh, it was so much fun. I mean, we all joked that we did it all for the launch event. That really was the whole point of that book, so that we could get our hair done. Yes. And I did have a salon open early. Do you remember? They opened just for us, like an hour or two early, and had every stylist they had come in. And we were all getting our hair done at the same time. It was like some 1950s movie. We just needed like a cigarette and a martini and we'd be set. And we were all lined up all the way down in front of all the mirrors and all of them were doing our hair at the same time with the victory rolls and got to put the dresses on, the polka dots. And then, yeah, we went to Grand Central and took photos and did a launch event at a bookstore. It was so much fun.
It was so much fun. And I know some of the people who are on the chat were there that day. Like Mindy was there. Hi, Mindy. How are you? And we had so many people following because it was so much fun. And you coordinated such a beautiful effort for us. And I remember well you persuading that salon to open early. And also we were like mean girls to Pan Junoff, who never wears a stitch of makeup. And we're like, look here, Pam, you're going to get in that chair. You're getting in that salon chair with your cigarette. And I still have a photo of her on my Facebook page looking like a really scared little mouse with like poked her head out of a hole. She's like, look what they made me do. And she looked so cute. So I'll try to repost those photos tonight. They're so beautiful. But Kristina is here to talk about today the ways we hide. So in your own words, can you tell us what your beautiful new novel is about?
Thank you. So excited to talk about this one. And I don't even think I shared with you yet. I think I just shared a few days ago online that it got picked as one of the top 5 books of Target's Book of the Year. So
that's so exciting. I'm sorry. I just scared my dog. He's like,
that's super exciting because as we'll talk about, I put so much work into this book that to have something like that happen is really exciting. So it has this gorgeous display at all the Targets right now. And I feel like I snuck into the back door of some cocktail party. Like I slipped past the bodyguards or something because of all of the like huge authors of books that are right next to mine, which is insane. But yes, so I get to tell you what it's about, which it is about a illusionist. So she is a female illusionist in 1942 who is the mastermind behind an escape show. And the reason she is so good at escape is because of a childhood trauma she survived in Michigan's copper country known as the Italian Hall disaster, which was something that I was stunned. I had never heard about before. Essentially, when you boil it all down, it is a false cry of fire, somebody yelling fire, and obviously there wasn't one, and triggered a stampede down a stairwell on Christmas Eve. And that it resulted in 73 people perishing. Vast majority of them were children. So I thought, how did I not hear about this before? And so wanted to share that. Well, through my story, that becomes her backstory. So she becomes obsessed with escape. She always needs 2 ways out of every room at all times. And Houdini becomes her idol. So she becomes a very good person to recruit by MI9, which is the British intelligence group. That is what I call the go-go gadget team of World War II. Some of the real historical figures inspired the character of Q from the James Bond film series. So the things that they created are so clever and phenomenal and all ties into magic and illusionists, which is what they used in real life to help them. And my character gets pulled much deeper in the war than she ever expects. So in a nutshell, there you go. That's kind of the premise of the story.
Fenna, I love it. Fenna is your heroine's name. That was a terrific elevator pitch. Thank you so much. I have so many delicious questions about this. The first question I have, because I know you, and I know how much research you do for your books. Like there was this apocryphal story that actually is true of Kristina flying in it's a B-52 bomber, right? Is that?
I rode in a B-17.
B-17.
Yeah. Very close. So, I've been on a lot of aircrafts, though. I've had pictures with like all of them. But yeah, B-17 was the one I got to fly up in. There were 10 of us. And as soon as they took off, we got to roam the aircraft the entire flight. And I even crawled into the nose gunner seat under the cockpit and then sat there with plexiglass under my feet. It's not made for all people. If you're afraid of heights, probably not a good seat.
No. Were you afraid of heights?
No, I'm not. So thankfully, I would have found out right then if I were.
I was going to say, as you discovered at that moment, you could handle heights.
I was okay.
Which book was that for?
So that was for Bridge of Scarlet Leaves, my second novel, which you gave a generous quote to all those years ago. And that one was about 200 non-Japanese spouses that lived in the internment camps. The Japanese American internment camps voluntarily is what inspired that story. So I had a character who was a tail gunner on a B-17. And so that's why I went up on the flight.
I love this. So this is just a fraction of the research Kristina does for all of her novels. What was just in general, like what was the scariest research you ever did, whether it was like you knew it was scary going in or you discovered it was scary in the act of doing the research?
So for all of the books?
Yeah, like out of your whole research experience, what was the most courage demanding moment of your research?
It probably going up into B-17. I can't think of anything else that was worse, that was like, could be more nerve-wracking than that. But I was just so excited that you just don't think about what could happen on a very, very old aircraft. But it also helps that nobody was shooting at us. I mean, that is one thing. You go, oh, this is so relaxing and fun because we're not getting shot at,
Yeah, I'm going to say you cheated in that because you didn't have historical reenactment. Did you have a bomber jacket for warmth? Was it cold? Was it cold in the gun turret? I've heard it's cold up there.
Oh, I'm sure it is if we were up high enough that you're trying to avoid, anti-aircraft fire. We weren't up that high, and I believe it was summertime when I went, so I really got spoiled. But yeah, it's not, it's going to have the air blowing through the aircraft the whole time. I mean, it's definitely not like flying on, on Delta.
No, I get unlucky on Delta, I think, but you hope for that non-yellow jackets kind of like recreation experience. That's where bomber jackets actually come from, which I had in high school because I thought it was cool, and then later learned they're actually for warmth. So talk to us a little bit about the research that you did for the ways we hide. You just said when you were talking about your Target pick, and thank you for giving me a great reason to go to Target, that you had done a lot of work for this book. Tell us a little bit about the research that you've done for the ways we hide.
Absolutely. So I often say that I put enough research into this book and I know you respect research because, girl, I don't know anybody. There are very few other author friends of mine that I think research as much as you do. And I am so in awe of that. And, but then again, too, like Jenna, which I love so much about her. So you have to understand that she like gets into character, like wears the braids and wears the lederhosen and bakes and bakes and bakes all of like the bakery food that is in her book. So incredible. So huge inspiration when it comes to to the research part. As far as mine goes, for the ways we hide, it was so much research that I like to say that there was enough research for 3 books in this. I've done a lot of research, as you've said, for every one of my novels. I've always then gone to experts toward the end, had them read through and make sure different scenes and different chapters, for fact checking were accurate, flagging them for any errors, because you'd rather hear about it before it is on the shelf at the store, as we all know. With the ways we hide, I had at least 15, if not 20 experts that read not just like one chapter, but half a book or 2/3 of the novel, because there was so much fact checking to do. So I worked with professional magicians, which were really fun to be able to have them go through. And when they give you a thumbs up, you're like, okay. So they knew about escapes, illusions, magic. I had an expert in MI9. So she wrote a book called MI9. And when you find somebody like that, you're like, you are my new best friend. So she was wonderful. And then it just goes on and on. There was linguists, there was Dutch military specialists, there was US paratrooper that he helped me just with just one scene of, dropping to Nazi occupied territory. The list goes on and on. So there was so much aside from the Italian Hall disaster, which we just talked about, having a park ranger there who helped make sure that all of my facts were right. And then there was another disaster that I touch upon in the book called the Bethnal Green tube disaster over in London, which was amazing that it's not more common knowledge, because it was the greatest as far as highest casualty rate of any civilian casualty disaster in all of World War II. So, but it got, kind of swept under the rug because it was essentially and that parallels in the story, of course, to a false cry of fire, and that there were anti-aircraft rockets that were being tested. And the sound was so unusual that people panicked and they thought that the Germans were dropping bombs. So it caused a stampede. So things like that I came across. And then the last thing I'll mention is the Netherlands, just the Dutch resistance and the Netherlands during World War II, which, as you know, is something that really isn't touched on much in novels. We see a lot of French resistance. We see a lot of Germany and France, but I hadn't come across a novel yet that took place in the Netherlands. We're familiar with Anne Frank's experience, of course, but past that, I knew very little about the Dutch resistance. So lot of research went into that too.
That is at least 3 books. Have you saved anything for the next 2 books? Like I'm kind of asking all of my questions back asswards today, so forgive me. Like normally this would come at the end, but I'm so fascinated with this. Do you have like a sequel to The Ways We Hide, a prequel, or like both? Because you have this compendium of knowledge now, and they're each such muscular, fascinating subjects.
But if I had been savvier, I probably would have broken it into 3 books. It should have been like part 1, part 2, part 3, and I would have been set for the next several years. That would have been really, really smart instead of like squishing it all into 1 book. So no, I am not. I definitely am not revisiting that. And I think anybody that reads the book should feel that there is really a lot of closure to the entire story. I sometimes like to leave a few threads that make you feel like the life of these people keep going on, and you wonder what happens sometimes to some of the more minor characters. But this one really, I felt like it really all wove itself into kind of a really lovely, like World War II quilt by the end is what I hope people take away. So no sequel. But I will say though, for let's see here, for Mother's Day, Amazon Original Shorts asked me to write a Mother's Day story. And the character that is the lead female protagonist in the story is Poppy, who was in Ways We Hide. Do you remember? She's the sweetest little orphan girl. And she has a very small part, important but small part in the book. And I loved her so much that I decided to make her an adult than in the short story. So she'll end up coming to terms with a lot of things from her past and a lot of secrets she's been hiding. And so, so that'll be fun. So for people who enjoyed Poppy, you'll get to see her again in a different light.
Excellent. I so love that. I think a lot of Ursula Hege's books too had like these sort of side characters and stories that she then developed into complete novels. Like Stones from the River was based on a side character in a collection of short stories she had. So thank you for continuing in that way. Like we love that. What was your favorite? I mean, because you have a whole compendium of worlds, of like sort of overlapping worlds that all fit in the Venn diagram of this book. What was your favorite part to research?
Oh gosh. Well, the magic was really fun. Houdini being fascinating with his life story and et cetera. But I would say probably maybe the Dutch, just because it was a whole other world, that the culture, the language, the food, all of those things were something that I was so unfamiliar with, that you know how it feels. I know you know how it feels when you walk away and feel like, wow, I actually learned so much. And you just have it's almost like a sisterhood culture that I have no ties to whatsoever. And now I'm just so familiar with it and just adore it. So now I cannot wait for the chance to be able to go over there and visit, now that the world has opened up again, and be able to go visit. So Utrecht was a city that I featured in the story, as you know, and it's kind of a more undiscovered Amsterdam. So this beautiful city full of canals that is made to be a bicycling city. So there are very few cars, thousands of bicycles, and all of the canals, when they drop down to water level, where you've got boats and floating by and all of this is just gorgeous. They have set up restaurants all along the canals, so down below. So it really is just stunning, and I cannot wait to go.
Are you going to go? And when are you going? And can we also go?
Well, yeah, because it'll be, like it's a business trip, Jenna, and I think that we should go do an interview over there.
Oh, I would love to. I have a really lovely Dutch publisher who, like, during the last 6 years now, is like, if I have to leave the country suddenly, can I come and be your Anne Frank at the publishing house and live in the attic and like make coffee and bread for you guys? And they're like, yes, you can. So, I mean, the Dutch people also, and Dutch readers have long memories about the war because the resistance was so active there. Do you, like me, sort of take things that you learned and then transpose them into the key of fiction for your books? Or do you ever put anything in that is just direct from something that you learned? Like, take the resistance, for instance. Was there like a resistance story that you learned that you kind of flipped into the book and transposed it?
So it's a good question. I think that a combination, right? That we learned enough about the resistance. I knew about where they had their drop zones. Like, actually found, isn't it amazing when you find on a website or something that is dedicated to just the Dutch resistance, and had exact dates, names, exact locations where all the drops happened and what happened to each one of those people when they were dropped. So letting you know that unfortunately almost all of them were captured almost immediately when they were dropped in, because at that point later in the war, the German intelligence had captured a radio operator from the Allies, knew the codes. And unfortunately then, which is just heart-wrenching, is that knowing then that as soon as they gave them the information of when they were coming, when they were being dropped, how many, that they were, essentially that they were given a death sentence before they even took off from the ground. So meaning that when they got there and dropped in, almost all of them were captured immediately and either then interrogated and executed or sent off to camps, which of course they didn't return from. Mm-hmm. So some of those I definitely used for locations and dates, et cetera. And then also and then finding, kind of as we all do, finding several stories and combining them and knowing what's plausible in order to make that happen and for my own fictional characters.
Do you do this thing that I do with historical fiction where it feels as though you're putting yourself in the shoes of the characters and saying, what would I have done? And I certainly do that as a reader, but I think about, what if, this is the novelist's favorite game, what if I had parachuted into enemy hands and been caught immediately? Would I have been brave enough to sustain myself, through interrogation? What if? So do you play that game also?
Yeah, a bit. I think, don't we all, with every major character? I don't know how we make a decision without that, but not what we would do necessarily, right? As much as what would we do if we were them and had the backstory that they have and have the fears that they have or the strength that they have. But even with all of that, I can tell you that I don't know about you, but every time I read and write World War II stories and the bravery and courage that these people have that we cannot really wrap our minds around today, really, in our country, I think, because we've been very fortunate in that way in a lot of ways, not having a war like that, that I sit there and realize what an absolute wimp I am. I'm like, I could never do that. I could never make that choice. And I'm sort of in awe of my fictional characters. So maybe I'm living cathartically, I should say vicariously, I should say through them, in that oh, I'm going to make her braver than me, because I could never do that. And especially because I think also coming from the standpoint of where I am now in my life and the fact that I'm a mom, and if I were a mom also when my kids were younger, could I have made those decisions that you have brilliantly written about as well, of taking in Jewish people and hiding them in your house and taking those risks when only your life is at risk versus when the lives of other people around you are also at risk. And I always wonder, could I have done that, and then again, volunteering to do something versus when somebody is knocking at your door and needing help, I think are also two different things. I can't imagine ever turning somebody away. So that brings me a little comfort and hoping that I would make the right choices, and choices that I would be proud of looking back.
One of the survivors I interviewed for the Spielberg Survivors of the Shoah Foundation project said to me, you never know what you will do until your back is against the wall. So don't sell yourself short. Also, you are the woman who went up voluntarily in a B-17 bomber and thought it was fun. So I don't believe this whole thing but I know, quite seriously, I know what you mean. If that knock comes at the door in the middle of the night, what do you do? And volunteering is something you do on principle. Answering a knock at the door is something that you do as a moral choice. It's all something that we as Americans haven't been asked to do. So I think that question, I at least throw it into fiction all the time. What would I do? What would I do? What would I do? So that's something that I love about your work. It helps me consider those questions. One thing I do know that I would not be able to do is the magic. So can you talk to us a little bit about the magic in The Ways We Hide? And I would like to know about your own research and what magic tricks you can do. And can you do one now for us, please?
Oh my gosh, I should totally do a magic trick for you. Okay.
Good.
Okay. I might have to go grab my deck of cards. So at some point I might be able to do that for you, which would only take a few seconds here.
Yes.
But in the meantime, because then you'll have to fill it with some interesting stories or something while I jump up.
I promise.
Okay, as far as the magic goes, yes. So researched a lot of magic. I've always loved sleight of hand. I think magic is so much fun. And luckily, my youngest son, who's 16, who you are very familiar with because he used to yodel for you and all that, before his voice dropped to a man's level of voice now, which is insane. So he used to love card tricks, loved performing them for anyone who would watch, at restaurants, at the post office. If I was in line to send things off, he would be over talking to another clerk or customers in line and showing them card tricks. He was very popular.
Of course. I mean, what a great little diversionist you have, making
Right.
everybody's life more interesting in the boring moments, right? So
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Because usually, U.S. Postal Service, USPS is not really where we all want to spend hours, so he made the time pass very quickly. So he knew all these card tricks, and so he was really helpful because I'm sure forgotten about a lot of them by now because it's been years. But when it came time to write, as you know, that there is, I won't give much away, but as you know, there's a very pivotal scene in the story that is in my head was like made for a movie. I saw it in my head way before I ever wrote a single word of the book. Actually, I knew then that scene would be in there. I knew it was be kind of high stakes and very edge of your seat scene that had to do with a magic trick. So in this case, there is some card tricks in there that I'll say that Fenna does. And I borrowed all of those from my son. So when it came time for that scene, I asked him, I said, okay, show me some card tricks that you know how to do that I could describe easily for somebody who does not know card tricks. So it's kind of like describing, how do you describe a song? How do you describe the notes? How do you describe colors? How do you describe a drawing? And it was one of those challenges that you're like, how do you describe a card trick without it becoming 5 paragraphs of technicality to go step by step, and you lose the reader and it's not important to the story. So, but also trying to convey what it would be like to do that trick on the other side. So that was really helpful. And he helped me come up with I think at least 4 tricks that became really important to the story. And in the meantime, I will show you. So one of the things that is very fun from the story, as you know, is like a map deck, which this is a replica. There was only one real map deck that they know of from MI9 that was created, designed by an illusionist named Jasper Mescaline. And he helped create these. There's the one that exists that we know of is on display at the Washington, D.C. Spy Museum. And so far, they have not agreed to lend me it. But don't think I won't ask someday. But yeah, I like to say, if we all dress in black and meet at midnight, I think we could change all of that. But in the meantime, this is a fantastic replica that somebody created on Etsy, which I couldn't believe I found this. That is just crazy town. So what happens is, if you soak this in water for about 2 minutes. So, by the way, this is what they sent in care packages into Allied POW camps to help them escape. So if you soak that in water, it looks like a normal deck. And then what happens after about 2 minutes is it starts to split apart. And then you see that there is a map on both sides. And so it'll look like that.
Oh my God. That is so, like, I literally have tears in my eyes looking at that because I'm such a research geek. But I'm like, oh, that is so fantastic.
Fun. And then if you have 52 cards and now they're all split double, you have a whole region of the area. So if any of the viewers here want to see actually it in action, what it looks like when you soak it and it splits apart, they can go on my website, and on the Ways We Hide page, I have 4 videos at least on there that are my little demo videos of MI9 gadgets I actually own from World War II. So you can watch them, how they work and how everything is magnetized to be a compass. I mean, it's just brilliant. Really, really brilliant.
So genius. And we did have a comment from the audience earlier that your videos and demonstrations are so cool. And I am going to go, and I spy on you on all the other channels, but I haven't seen those yet. So I am going to go look. But I feel like there's something extra magic. Like when you're writing a novel, you think that you're inventing the people, you're inventing their situations, but then you also know it's dependent on some of the actual research if you're writing historical fiction. And then when you are able to hold those objects in your hand, it's like its own kind of magic trick, its own kind of manifestation. You're like, oh my gosh, these cards actually exist. People used these.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so I've got, okay, here, let me see what else I got for you. So I'll show you one other one here. So this is and this is on the video, and I show a little bit more of what happens when you float it in water and all that too. But so this is like a shaving kit from World War II. Yeah. I mean, so cool that we can even still get this stuff, eBay, by the way, in case you're all wondering. I know you're wondering, eBay. But it's really amazing. So here is from World War II. So shaving kit. So you can see you screw it together, to kind of create the shaver, like as you got like the handle there, and you screw it together. But what is most important, it all works. Everything has to work, because if anything is ever tested, like a cigarette filter or a pipe, it has to work, because otherwise if it's tested, it doesn't pass the test, then you've got something here. You got caught. So everything would have to work, and they would use like a cigarette filter that if you take the cigarette off, as you know from the story, it becomes a very powerful telescope. So they were very, very clever. So with the shaver, you've got this razor inside. I'm going to be very careful here because it's old and rusted, and I don't want to have to go get a shot right after this. So there is, okay. And I have shaky hands too, just it's hereditary. My grandma, my mom gave it to me, but I'll see if I can hold it still. Okay. So you see that arrow? See that arrow that's kind of pointing to the center circle?
Yeah.
Okay. That is on purpose, even though it just looks like part of the design, because if you take this and drop it in water or a puddle and you spin it, it will point north. So now you have a compass in hand and are able to read. Yeah.
Okay, my mind is blown. I feel like those little French kids at the puppet show in that very famous photo. Everything you show me, I'm like, what is that? It's so great.
It's so fun. Okay, let me see. I think I can open this for you too right now. Actually, I'm pulling out some stuff I haven't pulled out for a while here. Okay, so another one. This is Airman's Watch. So looks really standard, except when you pull out the crown, okay, like that. And then, oh yeah, Sharon says silk map. I have a silk map here. I can show you that too. Okay, so here you go. And then you just take something kind of sharp, fingernail, what have you. But I'm cheating, because I've got something a little sharper than that. I've got like a little mini, what do you call it? Screwdriver, like for glasses. Okay, let me see if I can pop this up. I haven't done this in a little bit. Oh, hang on one second. Oh, the pressure.
Oh, I was just going to say, the pressure. No blood on the place, please.
I know, right?
Yes.
Oh, no.
Is a first for our frontliners. Oh, what happened? You didn't break the watch, did you?
No, God. No.
So responsible and bad.
Horrible. Okay. Oh, I can get it open right now because I have like sealed it. I wasn't planning to open it for you today. Okay. Anyway, this is like the suspense. So this is what it looks like. And you have to go on my website then to see what happens to it when it's opened. Yeah.
What? You're not going to tell us what happens? All right, everybody, you've got to go. You've got to go see it.
No, that you'll go check it out there and you'll go, that's cool. It's one of the cooler ones. Let me tell you, it is something super cool inside. So, okay. So
that's that. Talking to you right now, I would be like, bye, but people don't leave the interview. You
we got more
stuff. Okay. Here. That was amazing. Thank you for the show and tell. Okay. Ooh, yes. Okay.
Sharon brought up the map. I will show this. Okay. So this is kind of what helped inspire the whole book was the fact they used Monopoly boards and would put a silk map inside the board, 2 files and a compass. So that obviously then the Allied POWs would get these pastimes. And by the way, in case people are wondering, why would the Germans allow these pastimes into in care packages into the camps? That is ironically because the Germans thought, well, keep them busy with pastimes. They won't be busy planning escape. Little did they know, there were all kinds of things they were sending in. So here is a silk map that MI9 helped create. And it's so, so smart. I mean, look at this gorgeous map that is from World War II. All right. So the reason why they picked silk was really important. First of all, think of how thin it is. You can print color on both sides. You can sew it into an airman's tunic. So in case they were downed in occupied territory. And then, so here's where's the words that I can show you? 1 second. It is like, okay, here we go. So you can see some of the region that it is right there. Whoops, let me go the other way. Here we go. And the other reason besides the color is that because if it would withstand the weather, if it rained, if you dropped in a puddle, and most importantly, if you're in hiding, and you fold it, it doesn't crinkle like paper and give you away. So it's much quieter. So they would put this inside the Monopoly board, like the thin board in there, and then they would rip it open, take all the tools out, and then they would destroy the board. So to this day, there is not a known board that it still exists, but there are secret memos, and that's in the back of my book too. You'll see an actual secret memo in a photograph that is discussing which regions of map they're going to put inside the board. And the way you knew which region was in the board so that it would go according to the POW camp's location is that they would put what looked like an errant dot on certain avenues. So if it was by Marylebone Station, then you knew that it was like in France was going to be inside the board.
Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. And if that doesn't convince you to buy the book, and if you've already bought the book, you should obviously buy several copies for people because holidays are coming and everybody loves a spy story. But if that doesn't convince you to buy and read the book and give it away to many, many people, I don't know what will. That is the coolest thing ever. And you heard it here first. You have to go to Etsy and eBay and Target, like on Kristina's website. Like we're making a to-do list based on this interview. But thank you. That was so cool. I was recently at Levenger headquarters in Florida. I managed to weasel my way in there somehow, and they had a whole historical pen display, and one of the pens was like a ballpoint pen, and you would open not just the pen but the actual ink cartridge, and the silk map was rolled up in the ink cartridge. And I said, oh my god, I never knew that you guys made those. And they did. And I said, you should have those for Valentine's Day now and have people be able to put love notes in the pens for their beloved. So they're going to bring that back, which I think is so cool. But I love the hidden thing. So a question I have, like, The Ways We Hide was described, I think, quite aptly as Queen's Gambit meets the Alice Network. And you are a proud upholder of this tradition that we now have of girl spy novels, right? Like our wonderful friend Kate Quinn has like a series of them. Pam Jenoff has The Lost Girls of Paris, which we loved. We have The Ways We Hide. What do you think accounts for our enduring fascination with girl spies?
Yeah. Well, I think because a lot of their stories weren't told for so long. You know, I think that was something I hear from book clubs a lot, is that they say, yeah, there's all these great stories of these women. And it's so interesting that suddenly there's sort of this wave of them. And they said, you know, why do you think that is? And I said, well, because there wasn't a wave before. You know, so I think a lot of their stories, well, number one, you had a lot of them are classified for a very, very long time. And I think a lot of the women's stories, especially, you know, these unsung heroes, took even longer for their stories to come out. And now that they are, it's very exciting that they're making their way into not just memoirs, which are amazing, and these really beautiful nonfiction accounts of their heroism, but also now of novels, which is so great, because then those are books that maybe somebody typically wouldn't pick up a nonfiction book or a textbook, and yet they love a novel, and now they're getting their story that if it's well researched, they're learning a lot too.
That's such a great explanation. I mean, a good, well-researched nonfiction narrative is like reading a novel, but there are so few of those. And then when you get a novel, you get your actual multivitamins and your dessert at the same time. Like you get like the nourishment, and then you get the story, which I think is so fantastic. Do you ever feel like, this is just a personal question from me to you now, like both of us write about World War II. Recently, I was talking to my agent and I was trying to sort of game out what book I'm going to work on next. And she said, you don't always have to write about World War II. You could write something contemporary. And I was just like, do I look like Sally Rooney? Do you think I'm going to do that? But why also the enduring fascination with World War II stories? And then I have a follow-up question to that.
Yeah. So as you know, my first book was Letters from Home, and that was inspired by my grandparents' World War II courtship letters. And that one was like a Cyrano de Bergerac story, right? Set during World War II. And so, thank you. And so close to my heart because of my grandparents. And that kicked off my entire writing career. Never thought I was ever going to write a book before that. And then sat down and was blissfully ignorant, thank goodness, and didn't realize how clueless I was. So thankfully, I sat down and thought every word is brilliant. And no, so not brilliant. And learned a lot and researched a lot and read a lot, and and then developed from there. Well, after that, I thought I was going to write a contemporary story for the second book on my contract. I thought, you know what, why not just take off half the work, 2/3 of the work, and no historical research, just contemporary research, which is going to be much easier in comparison. And then when I ended up, at the time, I read Water for Elephants, and I remember thinking, no genre immerses me more into someone else's shoes and into another world where I forget even like around me, the world around me, like historical fiction. And so that's when I thought, you know what, if I feel that way, I should be writing that too. And so I just kept coming across, as I told you about, facts that I think are lesser known, that I feel like, I hope to contribute, and that it's not forgotten, which is about the non-Japanese spouses who lived in the camps voluntarily, like I said. And then the next one, The Pieces We Keep, was because I came across a declassified account of Nazi spies dropped off by U-boat on the east coast of America in 1942. And their story is stranger than fiction, with they made a deal with J. Edgar Hoover, and they were betrayed, and there was a secret military tribunal, and all these things that you're thinking, this would make a great movie, And so amazed I hadn't heard about it. From there, though, I joked that I spread my wings all the way to the 1930s. and wrote The Edge of Lost, because that was inspired by the fact there were kids who grew up on Alcatraz Island as family of the prison staff and weren't supposed to mix with the inmates, but some claim they secretly did. So of course I had to write that story. And then the next one was Sold on a Monday, which, as you know, is inspired by this photograph that haunted me, of kids being offered for sale on their own stoop in Chicago. And so that created Sold on a Monday. And that was during the Great Depression, then is when I set that. So I planned to write a completely different book instead of The Ways We Hide. But I got drawn back to the era only because of the story, because of learning about monopoly boards and MI9 and how that fed into the character of Q, and then the Italian Hall disaster, and wanting to tell that story in some way that wasn't all in it, wouldn't take up an entire novel that to me would feel too sad. So that's the reason.
That's amazing. Do you ever think about getting out of the historical fiction box and into the contemporary box now? Or do you feel that you have an endless supply of historical fiction sort of corners to shine your flashlight into?
I never feel like I have endless stories in me. I have the opposite problem. I am not the person that's like, gosh, I have so many ideas. I don't know which one I'm going to choose. I hate those people. So if that's you, Jenna, I don't want to hear about it.
No, I'm laughing because there was a recent, I think it was a New York Times profile of a certain author who I actually really love, but the author said, I have an endless supply of stories. And that was actually the headline of the article. And I remember being like, I hate your ass face. Like, I was like, I don't want to know. Why would you put that in the headline about an author? Because now everybody is mad at that author. So anyway.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, it'd be like, oh, I have so many shoes. I just don't know which one to pick. There's
so much beauty. I can't even get over how much beauty. And I have so much money, and I will always have so much money. It's really like, it's just a thing about me that I have so much money and beauty, eternal youth, and food. Like, what,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I don't even want to hear it. I don't want to hear it because the fact that I had another story idea really was like shocking because I always think I will never have another good idea for the rest of my life. So I always feel like the one hit wonder with each book. And I'm like, I'm going to run out. I'm never going to come up with something good. And I had an idea, like I said, before I wrote The Ways We Hide, but I just had sort of a setting and sort of a fun fact, but not a story. It wasn't enough for a whole novel. And I just couldn't figure out what the story was. And so that's why The Ways We Hide came together very quickly once I went back into my file folder and saw a documented photograph of the Italian Hall disaster right next. I mean, it really had to be laid out for me right next to the article that was about World War II and Monopoly and how it helped the Allies win. So only because the two were right by each other. I think I had some divine help there or something, because the universe was helping me out saying, hello. So that's when I thought this reminded me of like Melanie Griffith is what I say from Working Girl. Remember when she was like, Trask radio. That was me. And I'm like, this is her backstory. And she becomes an illusionist who then gets recruited. And so that's how it all came about. And then I knew I had to write that story because I had about 2/3 of the novel play out in my head like a movie within about 15 minutes.
Yes.
So I went, this is it. I just need to fill in the ending, fill in some parts to make all of this plausible and have a thread that makes it all logical in the structure. But other than that, it really was like a movie. So yeah.
That is going to be your name from now on around the Blaze, and elsewhere your name is going to be Working Girl.
I like it. I just got to hold on. We got to go back to that file folder, and I really hope I put things next to each other that are really helpful.
Yeah, I hope the juxtaposition is right. I mean, clearly, I was literally just thinking, as you said it, the universe wanted you to write this book, and that is such a charming story. And P.S., I saw Working Girl a few months ago. It holds up beautifully.
It does.
It does. Like, you are not just. I am not just a steak. You cannot just order me. Like, I love that. And also, one of my favorite World War II stories of all time that I keep returning to like every few years to read is called Shining Through by Susan Isaacs, which was made into a movie starring Melanie Griffith and Michael Douglas. It is the best movie, one of my top 3 books of all time. And that was like the original girl spy book, I think. So I feel as though if I ever attempt a girl spy book, I'm going to owe that legacy to you who have trailblazed for me, and also to Susan Isaacs and Melanie Griffith. Okay. Oh my God. Okay. So we're getting like audience comments, and we're also getting audience questions. And I'm wondering if we have an audience question that our producer might pop up on the screen. So Sylvia wants to know, when a story presents itself, do you feel a physical reaction to the possibility? That's such an interesting question, Sylvia. Oh my gosh.
Such a good question, because what's so great about that is the answer is yes. So that's very cool. It's almost like I planted Sylvia. So yeah, that is how I decide that I'm going to write a book every single time. Is I will not write a book until, and that's why I hesitated with the other idea I had that I'm now going to write, because once I figured out the missing element, I got chills. And so that is, I call it my chillometer. And so I'll run the idea, the premise, the elevator pitch in a few sentences past a couple of my really good friends that are authors. And I'll call them up and said, so what do you think of this? And as soon as I get through it, and if I have chills up my arm, that I know that I am so excited about it that I cannot wait to write the book. And I don't know about you, but usually for most books that I've written, about 2/3 through, you start thinking, oh my gosh, this is the most boring book that was ever written in the history of books. Like, watching paint dry is more thrilling. And yet there's a deadline, so it's too late to turn back. So I have to finish anyway. And of course, it's just because we're in such a thick of it and we've read it so many times and all of that we start getting started doubting it. I go back then to the premise and the pitch. And when I know then that one sentence pitch, we're ready for Spielberg anytime in an elevator, when it gives me chills, then I know that I've got something I'm going to hold on to, even when I start doubting it partway through. And so I go back and think, no, this is a good pitch. This is a good premise. This is strong enough to give me chills. So, and when the other person I always rely on too, the other author friends, that they say, that gave me chills, and I get them at the same time. Every single time, that is what has happened. And that's when I've written the book.
Okay, I just got chills from that comment, because that totally makes sense to me when I tell people things and they say, oh, I have goosebumps, or when I do readings and I sort of test drive my ideas on the audiences, when they go, ooh, like I have an ooh meter, that I think of that as sort of like an audible chillometer. I love chillometer. I'm going to use that forever now. Thank you. I love that. I think we have another question. Sharon, hi. Sharon is from Minnesota. She's like driving in Iowa right now. Like, she's in British Madison County and listening to us. Thank you so much. What did your sons think about the different gadgets? They had to think this book was pretty cool, as we do, but great question, Sharon. Thank you.
Well, okay. So they are 16 and 19 going on like 40. So you would think that they would geek out way more than me, but no, I mean, they thought they were cool, but I think that I'm mom. I think that they're just like, they're so used to this stuff with me that they're like, oh, that's cool. And then they move on. So I definitely get way more excited. But the same holds up when we go down to Disneyland every, handful of years. And I am the one running, not them. So I'm the one that's like, we're getting up at 6, and I'm a night owl. We're getting up at 6 a.m. We are doing the magic hour. We are doing fast passes, and they're just, they go along with it every time, because they know that's my one place that I'm a little bit insane. But yeah, it's kind of like that. They just go, yeah, that's mom's thing. So they think it's cool, but not nearly as cool as I do.
Oh my God, that's so cute. Hi, Trisha. We have a question from Trisha, who is our podcast director on The Blaze. I'm wondering, how does Kristina balance her time between researching and writing? It must be a challenge with historical fiction. It is, girl. It is a challenge. Please answer the question.
Yeah, you were asking the right person, which is you. Balancing is hard. Yeah. So I think I don't know about you, but I think we might be similar. I research for usually about, I don't know, maybe 4 months, 5 months before I start writing, because then I know what is going to happen in my story. I know it's possible. It helps guide my story, because I'll come across something that absolutely has to go in the book. And then I'll write the outline. And when I write the outline, it's usually very fast, because by then I've done enough that I've already seen it like a movie in my head, that I'll write the outline that will evolve. But of course, I want to say in a couple days, I write the entire outline, and that'll be, 70 chapters outlined and ready to go. And then I'll research as I go. It's constant, right? It's constant until they pry the PDF out of my computer. I can't say out of my hands anymore. And send it off to the printer. I mean, like 11 3/4 hour, I was still finding little things and emailing my very patient editor. Is it too late? Can we change this one word? Because I had so many kind people, like Holocaust survivor, the Dutch Holocaust survivor that read and, found just like one thing, just change one word and, and got to sneak it in there, which was amazing to be able to fix those things before they went to press. But yeah, it goes until the very end. And then I just hope to stop at that point, because otherwise I will find something that I will start questioning if I should have changed something in the book.
That is amazing. And you write like I write. I think I do the research and then I do an outline and then I do the chapters. And then I have tried to be a pantser instead of a plotter. It just does not work for me. I don't feel like the book has a physical reality to it unless I have researched what my people in the book have gone through. Susie wants to know, do you have another historical fiction novel that you're currently working on from your magic folder of ideas? I put magic in there.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, gosh. So I am working. I haven't started it yet, but I'm going to very soon, because, just wrapping up the Amazon short. And I will say that one takes place in the early 1960s without giving away way too much. And then I will be diving into the next novel. Yes. So that is due next year, toward the end of next year. So I'm excited. I can tell you so far, I cannot wait to tell you more. But this one is early 1900s, and there is a lot of Oregon in it, because that's where I am. That's where I'm from. And there's a really fascinating history here in Oregon, as far as, all port towns, everywhere probably really, but especially, port towns, West Coast. If you think of Barbary Coast and all, there's a lot of seediness and corruption and kind of this dark underbelly of the city. You've got Chinatown and opium dens and gambling halls, and there's some cool stuff. So I'm very excited about that one. Yeah. So that'll be next.
Anytime I hear corruption and vice, I'm like, oh, good story. Hi, ladies. Hi, Lynn. Thank you for joining us. The bigger question is, why don't we all know about both the tragedy and MI9? We need to be better informed. Thank you, Kristina. Yeah. Why is that?
You know what? I think that, it's interesting of who writes history down, and the tragedy in the Italian Hall disaster happened in, if I remember right, off the top of my head, I'm a little tired, 1913, I believe, if my memory serves. And in my story, I ended up fictionalizing a town. Everything else is exactly the same. But because I could not reconcile the two timelines with World War II. And so I had to push it forward, and have it happen a little bit later in time. And I explained that on my author's note. But at the time, 1913, even more so, of not having the communication that we have today, of spreading stories around, and the people who kind of controlled what was put in the newspapers. So they believe, there are theories that the man who yelled the false cry of fire was anti-union. So there was, and the copper miners were on strike at the time. So there was a lot of contention between, the media and the newspapers, the union leaders, and then of course the anti-union and strikers. So, and anti-strikers. So I think because of that reason, I think some of that gets brushed away, kind of is lost to history. And they were all immigrants. Everybody there that died at the time were immigrants. And I think that those stories get lost very easily as well. They were all very poor. And then as far as MI9 goes, MI9 is a completely other reason, right? Because MI9 was classified. So highly classified. We all know MI5 and 6. There's very few people I've come across that had heard of MI9, which is why I wanted to write about it. And which we know, like a lot of the spy stories and stuff are MI5 and 6. But the gadget team is just so cool. So some of the things they did were so successful during World War II that they were kept classified until about 1985, because they thought they might have to use it against the Soviets during the Cold War. So that's why a lot of it never came out. You weren't supposed to talk about it. Very much like the people who worked at Bletchley Park and kind of burned everything afterwards and said, don't speak of this, until they could finally start talking about more toward the end of their lives.
Wow. What an interesting conflict between sort of like historical safety imperative and then needing to know our history and to telling different perspectives from history as well, like the immigrant stories that we're finally starting to see come to light, and women's stories. Thank you so much for shining your amazing spotlight on all of these stories. We can't wait for the next one about, I'm going to just call your book Seedy Oregon, although I think you'll probably come up with a more elegant title than that. One last question from me. What would you like to say to your readers who are watching today?
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I've been joking lately now that I have my oldest in college. She's a freshman now down at Chapman University in Orange County, which very conveniently is near Disneyland, by the way. I did put that on the pro list, the pro and con list. I put the asterisk by near Disneyland. So thank you so much for reading my stories and spreading them around and researching more about things that you read in there because you want to learn more, and also helping send my kids to college. So because you are supporting education one book at a time. So thank you for that. And I will add one thing really quick. If those of you watching are in a book club or have friends that are, just know on my website as well, you'll see there is a whole book club guide that has recipes and activities and the videos, but also a recipe for invisible ink. So you'll want to check that out because it's very fun.
Oh, I love that so much. And don't forget also, you need to buy 800,000 copies of The Ways We Hide, and also Invisible Ink, and also go to Etsy and eBay. And then you have all of your holiday shopping done because you can give like silk scarves with Europe printed on them and this book.
It's
fantastic. True. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being with us and telling us the behind the scenes of this fantastic spy novel. And good luck with CD Oregon.
Thank you. You're going to die when you find out what the real title is. We'll figure it out together.
Yeah, if it's not CD Oregon, I'm going to be really mad. And Blazers, don't forget to join me tomorrow morning. I blaze all the time. I'm going to be on with Baking with Rach, and we're making lemon meringue pie, which is a sort of magic trick in and of itself. At least I think so, because I can't make meringue. So thank you for joining us, everybody. Happy weekend. Happy reading. Bye.